Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're in the stream.
Now, live on YouTube. And I'm Malika Bilal. Today, what's next for Raqqa?
ISIL has been pushed out, but with the city destroyed, its future remains unclear.
Hi, I'm Rafif Jouejati, Director of the Foundation to Restore Equality and Education in Syria. I also represent the local coordination committees in Syria, and I'm in the stream.
It's been a week since the Syrian Democratic Forces, with the help of intensive bombing raids from a US-led coalition, dealt a huge blow to ISIL by taking full control of the Syrian city of Raqqa.
In 2014, ISIL captured the city and made it the de facto capital of its self-proclaimed caliphate. The offensive against them, which began in June, caused widespread destruction, leaving roughly 270,000 people homeless and sparking a serious humanitarian crisis. And while the fall of Raqqa is a major setback for ISIL, the ordeal is far from over for the people of this once vibrant city.
Joining us to talk about this in Germany, Abdelaziz Al-Hamza is a former Raqqa resident who's now co-founder of Raqqa is Being Slaughtered Silently, a group of activists who use citizen journalism to expose the tactics of ISIL. Also in Germany, Mohammed Kader is another former resident of Raqqa. He's now CEO of Sound and Picture, a documentary organization committed to recording the violence of ISIL in Syria and Iraq. In France, Nicolas Henin, a former journalist who was kidnapped by ISIL in Raqqa, that was back in 2013, and held captive for 10 months. And in Turkey, Hashim Al-Habara, he's a senior correspondent for Al Jazeera. He's been covering the conflict in Syria for this network. Good to see you, everybody. Good to see you, gents. Let me start with some video, some footage from about a week ago. Celebrations dancing in Raqqa. Have a look. Mohammed, you used to live in Raqqa. When you saw these celebrations, is this mission accomplished? What kind of victory is this?
These videos actually shocked me because as one who lived in Raqqa before, I feel that those people just dancing on the bodies of our families and the bodies of our friends. They say that they liberate Raqqa. We know that this is not true because this liberation costed thousands of civilians who have been killed. It's costed thousands of civilians who are displaced now. There are many civilians of Raqqa are outside in the camps living in very bad conditions. There are many thousands who have been killed in these operations by artillery shells of SDF and by coalition airstrikes. And now they're dancing on these bodies. They're dancing, for example, in Naim Square, which is one of the most dangerous squares in the world. There were many executions did by ISIS in this square, and now they dance in this square. They should respect the blood of our families and friends, and they should not do that in our city.
And Mohammed, I hear what you're saying there. I wanted to share this perspective from Sid. He says Raqqa being the de facto headquarters of ISIS or ISIL, the fall of Raqqa then is a victory in the sense that it quashes the dream of an ISIS caliphate. He goes on to say, though, but the fall of Raqqa doesn't signify the end of ISIS or ISIL. Abdelaziz, what do you make of Sid's comments? Do you see it as a victory? And does this mean that ISIL in Raqqa is now over?
So, yeah, I don't see it as a victory, like as Mohammed mentioned, and like I want to say that 90% of the city is destroyed. I'm from Raqqa, so I've been born and raised there. So, the city is like completely different than the city that I know, the city that I grew up in. So everything's completely different, as you can see in this footage or this videos. So, and why those people are dancing or consider it as liberation. I talked with many people who left the city recently, and they said they couldn't stay there because of the smell of the death. Thousands of civilians are killed under rebels. So, and I was just talking with friends here in Germany, and they told me after the Second World War, when the soldiers entered Berlin, they stayed silent. So they didn't dance. They respect the people who've been killed during the battle. And Raqqa was completely different. And it's not only me, Raqqa residents, Raqqa people who still live in there don't consider it as liberation more than a new occupation.
I'm hearing clearly.
I recognize.
Yeah, Nicholas, go ahead.
I was in April 2003 on Further Square in downtown Baghdad at the time of the invasion, and well, I can very well understand the feeling of the people who see, well, basically foreigners coming to their own city and pretending that they are liberating, and actually just displaying their own flags because this is what has just happened in Raqqa.
Nicholas, you said pretending. Why did you say pretending that they're liberating?
Well, just look at these pictures. Just you're answering yourself by displaying these pictures as you're asking me this question. So, is this a liberation? I mean, these pictures are just answering the question.
Hashim, you've been covering this story for some while for Al Jazeera. I'm just thinking about the coalition's perspective of what do they feel that they have achieved right now with Raqqa?
Well, basically, for the US-led coalition against ISIL, this is quite a significant moment because Raqqa, as you said, was the self-proclaimed capital for ISIL in Syria. And for them to evict ISIL from there is quite significant because then it means that the next push will be to take over Deir ez-Zor, which is the last remaining stronghold for ISIL in Syria. It also an indication of the growing influence of the SDF, which is a coalition of Kurds and Arabs, but it is mainly led by the YPG, which is one of the most powerful Kurdish factions operating on the ground. So I think it serves the narrative of the push by the international community, particularly by the Americans and their allies, to continue their fight to tighten the noose around ISIL in Iraq and in Syria. And for them, the moment they can manage to evict them from major cities or urban zones is quite a step forward. But as Abdulaziz and Mohammed were saying in the past, just shortly ago, this is something that came really with a price. We're talking about thousands of civilians who were killed. We're talking about entire neighborhoods in Raqqa which were completely destroyed. And it won't be easy. It will really take some time for people to be able to go back to their own areas.
Oh, Hashim, you mentioned the civilians killed and the houses and neighborhoods destroyed. I want to share a picture tweeted to us. This is Mazen Hassoun. He is a Syrian journalist based in Germany. He says civilians aren't allowed yet to come back permanently to Raqqa. The SDF, or the Syrian Democratic Forces that Hashim mentioned, allowed them to check their homes and to see the damages only. And you can see this picture here that he included. So what life is like for those who are still there, the very few, or those who fled and are in camps outside the city, is what this video commenter wants us to know about. This is Hussein Akhush, and this is what he told the stream.
The camps are not proper places, and the people are living in pitiful circumstances. And everyone I spoke to, all they want is to go back home. But the sad reality is that their homes have been destroyed in the fighting.
Mohammed, can you take us through what the humanitarian situation looks like for those who fled or might still be there?
It's a very bad situation. And even about those who Mazen speak about, that SDF allowed some people to go back to their homes. Actually, they didn't allow a lot of people. There were demonstrations in Al-Mashlab and in Al-Sbahiyya neighborhoods. Last few days, they demand to go back again to see their homes. But SDF shoots some of them. There were angers between those civilians. They just wanted to go back again to their homes to check it, to see if there are any maybe people under the rubble, to see what's happened to their homes. But SDF prevented them of doing that. And about the camps, there are no any kind of human conditions in these camps. They deal with them in very racist way. They deal with them just because they are from Raqqa or from Deir ez-Zor. They speak with them in a racist way. They told them you are ISIS supporters, but in fact they are not ISIS supporters. They were under the occupy of ISIS, and they are the most people who survived from ISIS. ISIS executed their families, executed friends of them, and take their homes. So this is the problem. SDF see the people of Raqqa, those civilians who are from Raqqa, as ISIS supporters, but this is not true. We know that they were forced just to live under ISIS control because they cannot go back or go outside of the city.
Hashim, what can you tell tell us about the Syrian Democratic Forces? They're now looking after the Syrian refugees from Raqqa. They're running the camps. They're kind of overseeing Raqqa right now. What do we need to know about them? Asham. The Syrian Democratic Forces, they're overseeing the refugee camps. What can you tell us about the way they operate?
Well, we've been in touch with families who live in makeshift camps on the outskirts of Raqqa. And basically, we're talking about thousands of people who have fled the fighting, thousands of people who were trapped inside Raqqa. And when they managed to flee, as some of them risked their lives trying to in that journey, and they were told to go to areas where they might find food and shelter. They arrived there was basically nothing. I'm talking about many makeshift camps under very poor conditions, and this is a huge problem. We're talking now about in the coming weeks is going to get really cold in those areas, and they have nothing. International aid agencies are trying to get to those areas to provide immediate aid to the people. So there are really many cases of sufferings among the people. The problem is that the SDF is saying at this particular moment no one can go back to Raqqa because they're concerned. They say that some of the houses might be still booby trapped. There might be some mines in different areas, in the tiny alleyways that lead to the old town. So there's absolutely no way for those people to get back home anytime soon. They're concerned that they might never be able to go back to their areas in the near future. So we're talking about really very delicate situation for thousands of people who are still now trapped in the midst of vast desert areas with nowhere to go.
You know, what you said is actually echoed here on Twitter as well, Hashim. This is Nader, who says even after ISIL have been pushed out of Raqqa, many are still dying by stepping on landmines that were left behind as a nasty surprise, really just picking up on what you said there. Another person, this is via YouTube Live, Afroz writes in that the biggest problem for Raqqa is health and food, and that should be fixed first. Abdul Aziz, you heard what Hashim said about aid agencies, knowing that this is a priority right now. What are families feeling in this moment? Are you still talking to people who are on the outskirts who have fled Raqqa, and what are their concerns?
Yeah, like I'm still in touch with people who still live in Raqqa, and the main problem that talking first about the camp, the major camp is in Ain Isa, and it's an arresting camp. So people, they can't leave it unless they have a Kurdish person to guarantee them. So people, they are upset being in their own city and they are in kind of this arresting camp. And then like tens of people died because of the bad conditions in that camp. So they're like under arrest. They're having like the bad conditions. They are living with bad services. The luckiest of them who had a tent to stay in, other they are staying in nowhere in the desert. So all that things, and like the main problem that they're facing right now, even like they consider it worse than health and food and anything else, is the recruitment by ISIL, forcing children under 18 to join them and fight against ISIS. So those children who were lucky to survive ISIS, some of them were not lucky to survive ISIL. So their families avoided them joining ISIS. And here I'm not talking only about children, even like everyone. There is like a military service. So, and people, they don't know where to go, what to do, living with all these conditions, talking about the violations that the ISIL have been committed all the time, talking about the first aid, the role of the international organization, like the humanitarian rule is completely disappeared from the city, especially the countryside, talking about Tel Aviv, the northern countryside. That area is under ISIL control since almost 2 years, and like people are still dying there because of the bad conditions. So, and like talking about like more and more of the violations. So as the others mentioned, there are like also the arresting campaigns, shouting people, forcing people to join demonstration, cheering for Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of PKK, which consider an internationally extremism organization, talking about like ethnic cleanings, displacement, burning houses. All that things was even not mentioned in the media. Everyone was like cheering, ISIS is defeated. But what about the rest of people who are suffering there?
Yeah.
Nicholas, go ahead.
I would like also to mention the people who have disappeared. Well, during the over 3 years of occupation of Raqqa by ISIS, according to some organizations, around 7,400 inhabitants of Raqqa have been captured or kidnapped by ISIS, by the jihadis. And actually, at the moment, since the collapse of ISIS in Raqqa, there is a trend, a move from their next of kin, from their families or friends, to try to get some information about their fate. Some accounts on Twitter especially tried to launch the hashtag where are the kidnapped by ISIS, or where are the kidnapped is the hashtag. And they released a communique in Arabic, English, and French. Many of these friends and families live in the West. They try to get information from also the coalition, also from Western sources. They try locally to get in touch with the Kurds. They assume that out of the 7,400 prisoners, not all of them have survived, but some of them must be still alive. Where are they? Have they been taken away with the fleeing jihadis? Or maybe some of them may very well have been mistaken for jihadis and be at the moment prisoners of the coalition or of the FDS.
Nicholas, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Actually, we received tweets from people alerting us to that. This is Mazen again. He says these people are the first who fought ISIS or ISIL in Raqqa long before the world knew IS.
Exactly.
They've detained since 2013 and 2014. We want them. That's just a few of those pictures. Of course, we can't independently verify any of the faces on this, but the Twitter handle for more information is kidnapped by ISIS. You can see it on my screen here. And they say, we also ask that they help us in learning more relevant information about the prisons and jails that were formerly run by ISIS. But Mohammed, with no one actually in charge, or at least it being unclear on who's in charge, whether it's the SDF or whether it's a vacuum, who will they get that information from? And do you see that actually being forthcoming?
We saw a lot of ISIS members left the city, and we saw them without any prisoners with them. We know that there were a lot of prisoners in the city when ISIS members left the city and SDF captured it. And now SDF and the coalition led by America say that there are no prisoners, or we couldn't find any prisoners in the prisons. But we know that this is not true, because we could document many of prisoners. There are families for them outside of Raqqa, and there were members of SDF called them and asked them to pay money to get information about these prisoners. So this is not true. They have information, and they have maybe also many of those prisoners, they take them as ISIS supporters, but we know that this is not true, because they show a lot of photos for hundreds which they say they are ISIS members. They came to SDF, but we know most of them are just civilians, and now they became prisoners with SDF on charge of supporting ISIS. But in the fact, there were many ISIS members, true ISIS members. I know specifically one of them who was a singer for ISIS, and now he became a singer for SDF. So the true member of ISIS joined SDF after making some deals, and civilians became prisoners just on charge of supporting ISIS. This is the problem about the situation, and SDF, they don't show the full reality of the situation.
Okay. All right, so guests, let me just remind our audience about how Nicholas made the headlines. Journalists mostly don't want to be in the headlines. This is a headline from 3 years ago from the Guardian newspaper. Kidnapped French journalists were chained together in underground cells. Here is Nicholas being reunited with his family. This still picture looks adorable. I want you to see the video of Nicholas actually getting off the plane and seeing his family right there. Nicholas, you were in Raqqa for 10 months, not voluntarily, and you were held by ISIL. So this idea that ISIL is now being pushed out of Raqqa, that must resonate for you personally. What
yes,
next?
it does.
What next for the city?
It does. I mean, of course, well, it's extremely important for me to know that ISIS is no longer in Raqqa, because ISIS was holding the city just like a rude occupier. I mean, it was a colonial state. ISIS is colonial. They pretend that they're building a dream state for the Muslims, but actually they asked people from all over the world to come and occupy land that was previously already occupied, and they kicked the previous inhabitant out. This is the reality of IS. So yes, that's a great satisfaction for me to know that these people who have hurt me and hurt me also many of my friends very hard are now out. Well, hopefully. But I want them to be out for good, meaning I don't want them to either stay in the mind of the people that for a reason or another people regret them and say, well, it wasn't so bad. I mean, if it turns wrong, maybe in 2 years, the inhabitants of Raqqa, they will be willing ISIS back. So I don't want that. And I want to get rid of them for good, and that they just vanish and disappear. And for that, we must, yes, fight them. We must, yes, destroy them. But we also have to find political solutions to the local crisis. Because as long as there will be a local crisis in Syria, there will be terrorism around.
Let me a question that so many people are asking right now. Let me just pull one off Mohammed Kada's Twitter feed. Who will pay for the reconstruction of Raqqa? You've been watching during part of this program how devastated Raqqa is. Another Al Jazeera headline. Exactly the same question. The reconstruction of Raqqa. Hashim, what are you hearing about that? There's so much work to be done. No infrastructure, no facilities, no power, nothing in Raqqa right now. What are you hearing about how it's going to be rebuilt?
We do understand that the United States of America is now in touch with different countries like Saudi Arabia. They're hoping to tap into the deep pockets of Saudi Arabia to play a significant role in rebuilding Raqqa. But I have to say that the political landscape in Raqqa itself remains complex, and I personally have doubts that they might be able to move forward anytime soon if they can't solve some of the problems they face. Now Raqqa is under the control of a local council and the Asaish, which is the local police unit. However, because in Raqqa there is the Arab community and the Kurdish community, and there is this growing divide because the Arab tribesmen now feel that the Kurds are now expanding their territorial gains and influence, and then they feel somehow sidelined and discriminated against by the Kurds. Number two, during the celebrations and the video that you were showing earlier, the Kurds were displaying the huge posters of Abdullah Öcalan, who is the leader of the PKK, and this is something which has backfired here in Turkey. Turkey considers some of the Kurdish factions in Syria as terrorist organizations. So they're really concerned that they made it quite clear that they would never allow them expand further or create a corridor of their own on the border with Turkey. Unless those problems are solved, I can't personally see the international community stepping in, pledging making some pledges on starting the reconstruction. Now, for the reconstruction to start also, you have to find a permanent political solution to the crisis in Syria.
Right.
And this doesn't seem to be the case anytime soon. So we're talking about a wide array of complex problems there.
Milika.
I will end here with Reina, who I think would pick up on the wider array of problems. Reina says, who will rebuild, which will take years, restoring basic essential services, clearing of explosive devices, and then who will govern Raqqa?
So many questions, so many answers unanswered right now. But before we go, we want to make sure that you know how to get involved in our show. Every day we are streaming live on Al Jazeera English YouTube page, and you find the show link under the upcoming live streams. And so join our community, engage in our discussion, and you too could be on the stream. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your insight today. Really appreciate you being on the stream today. Take care, everybody.